Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of the Apod. Fun chats, fun topics, fun people. Every single Wednesday, msgnetworks.com, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Arda Ocal. Thank you so much for checking out this podcast, for listening to the conversations, and enjoying them, and sharing them, talking about them, and leaving a comment and review on iTunes. It helps other people find the podcast if you do that. So thank you. It's been a great week. I have one beef. I went to the mall before we get to our guest. I'm very excited about our guest, by the way. This is, it's a little bit of a, there is a sports connection with our guest this week, but there's definitely a fascinating story. Our guest has two really interesting realms that she cohabitates. So we will talk about that in just a second. You definitely want to stick around for that. But one beef I'd like to get to is I went to the mall the other day, and I feel like people have an irrational fear of stopped escalators. I don't understand this. So if the escalator is moving normally, people get on and get off as you normally would assume. And if it were just a set of stairs, people would do the same thing. But as soon as you're behind a group of people and you're walking towards an escalator and you discover that it's a stopped escalator, essentially a set of metal stairs, okay, let's be real here, it's a set of metal stairs, all hell breaks loose. It's like all social norms and conventions go out the window and fear sets in. And I'm not sure what kind of fear this triggers, because it's just a set of stairs. Yeah, the escalator isn't moving, but it's a set of stairs. It literally becomes stairs, a static set of stairs that you're going to either climb or go down the set of stairs. But 3 or 4 different times at the mall, people suddenly stopped as if their brains could not compute what was happening in front of them. It was like the escalator stairs became jaws of death, and they were going to be consumed if they were to go up the set of death stairs. Like the escalator was suddenly going to start moving in the middle of their escalator stair climbing journey, and that was going to be the worst thing that was going to happen to them in their lives. Seriously, it was like the ratio of fear displayed versus what the situation was. I do not understand this. And I get it. The human mind is a fascinating thing, and people can be scared of anything or any sort of irrational fears. I get it. But to see this one in action is surprising and mind-boggling, fascinating. If you listening happen to be somebody who is an expert in human fears and how that manifests in the human brain, let's get to our guest. I am really excited that she was able to join us here on the Apod. Her name is Felice Cohen, and if you search her online, the first thing you will find is a video on YouTube of her and her apartment that she lived in for several years. I believe she mentions it in the podcast, starting in 2007, I want to say, but she mentions it in the podcast. And that video has over 16 million views. I'm looking at it right now. As of this recording, 16,659,552 views. And the reason this video went so viral is because Felice's apartment in New York City beside Central Park was 90 square feet. 90. That's it. Felice lived in a 90 square foot apartment for 5 years. So naturally, I'm sure you listening, you have a bunch of questions about living in such a small space. There are jail cells that are larger than that. There are a ton of questions that come to mind, and we ask all of them. It was a fantastic conversation. Not only about that, she has a sports connection as well. She played Division I sports, and she was also a part of a women's sports magazine. So there is definitely a strong sports connection here. We spend some time talking about sports. We spend a lot of time talking about this apartment. And also, her grandfather is a Holocaust survivor. So that was in fact her first book. She's an author, and her first book it's called What Papa Told Me. It's about the stories that her grandfather told her as a Holocaust survivor. So you can find all of these books that she's written at felicecohen.com. And the one pertaining to her 90 square foot apartment and living there for several years is called 90 Lessons for Living Large in 90 Square Feet or More. And she is a professional organizer. So she gives you tips in this podcast, she gives us tips in this podcast about better organizing our lives and decluttering and how living so minimal has decreased her stress. Very cool podcast. Really glad Felice was able to come on. And so without further ado, let's get to this conversation here on the Apod with Felice Cohen. All right, so we're sitting here, MSG Networks, in the usual, what I'm now calling my podcast studio, which is really a makeshift office. I need to decorate it better, though, I think.
Yeah, nice large windows.
Yes.
Nice, not bad view.
Beautiful view of dirty-looking buildings in New York City.
Yeah, a couple pigeons on the windowsill, but
I think, but really, when we're talking about buildings, you're like the person to talk to, especially in New York City. So, well, first of all, Felice, thank you very much for joining us. We met, how long has it been now? A few months?
Yeah, I think it was.
We met at a random meetup. It was a nonfiction authors sort of meetup that neither of us have been to since.
I don't even think they had another meeting. I don't even know.
And actually I had heard about you before I got there, so it was very serendipitous for me to have met you, and I was glad that I did, because actually maybe a week before that meeting, I saw your interview on, was it Good Morning America or the Today Show? One of the two.
America.
Yeah, so I saw that clip, and my girlfriend and I were literally talking about that, and just we had so many questions that were not answered in that video. And then when I met you, I said, I need to ask all these questions. But that was not the appropriate time. But this is.
Absolutely.
So that's great. But let's start at the beginning, because you do actually have a sports connection. So let's talk about that first before we get into living in a 90 square foot apartment, which is amazing, first of all. And you've written about it, so we'll get into that. But you have a couple of sports connections. You played at D1 schools.
I did. I played at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. I was recruited to play Division I volleyball and softball. And Division I is hard. Division I is not, it was fun in high school. I excelled.
What did you play?
Volleyball, and I played center field.
Okay.
And softball.
And so you grew up playing those sports, you loved them. Was there one over the other? Or?
Basketball was probably my favorite.
Really?
And I almost tried out at UMass, but it was intense. I went to Lyrebirds basketball camp when I was 9. I always loved sports. I grew up, we played every sport. And so I went to UMass and I started playing, and then it was just too intense. So I ended up playing a few months, and then I quit, and that's when I started writing for the paper.
So growing up, did you have dreams of being a professional athlete?
I did.
Yeah.
I wanted to be the first girl on the Red Sox.
Really?
Yeah,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you did. So you played for a few months. You said this isn't for you, and then you started to write.
Yeah, I covered the games. I wanted to stay connected with, my new teammates and friends, and I covered the games for the newspaper. And
was that a weird transition?
You know what? It was hard at first. I remember crying, calling my parents, and I had never quit a sport before. I mean, I was a varsity captain. I was an all-star. I was Jewish athlete of New England my senior year of high school. Sports was everything for me, but I realized it was time to let go. And then it was 1988. There was no WNBA. There were no women's really professional sports. So I thought it's a lot of effort to put into something that's not really going to have as much payoff when I graduate. like writing.
Yeah. So take me into that first interview that you did. Now you're on the other side, right? Normally people are talking to you, so now you're talking to them. Was there like a different dynamic among your friends on the team, or was it an advantage?
I think it was an advantage. I mean, I knew them, I knew the sport, and what was the hard part was learning how to write sports. I mean, I'd been reading about it for so long, but it was really a great way to learn creative writing, because a lot of the sports writers, the collegiate at UMass had great writers, and so I was learning kind of creative writing just by covering sports.
And did you, I guess, find a newfound appreciation for the sports writers that had been covering you in the past?
Yeah. There's a lot. You can't put everything in. You only have so much space. You want to try to capture a whole game, so you really have to be, kind of diligent on what you pick and how to really get the highlights in.
Did you do any writing before that?
I hated writing.
Really?
Well, in high school, I had a teacher my sophomore year that really kind of made me enjoy writing. I started in college as a math major. I ended up leaving as a marketing and public relations major in sports, and I really got into writing. End of high school, learning creative writing. It was more write what you want. So in college, I really had the opportunity to do that. I was a columnist. I was a Jewish affairs editor. And so writing a weekly column on just my opinion was fun. And that's really where I got the bug.
So you graduated. What was the first job out of school?
I worked at UMass.
At UMass?
Yeah, it was one job given one graduating senior. I was an admissions rep.
Did you apply it with the Red Sox?
No.
You didn't?
No. I wanted to play center field. I didn't want to work in the back office.
Oh, you didn't want to work in the front office?
Yeah. Unless I was out there shagging fly balls, no.
No, nothing. I could have envisioned, just based on what you said, like being a beat writer for the Red Sox or something.
Yeah.
Might have been a good consolation or something.
Yeah, I only wrote sports for that first year, my freshman year. After that, I just started writing more creative topics.
Okay.
It was more fun for me.
Okay, so you get this job, and tell me about that. What was that like?
It was fun. I traveled mostly Long Island, and I just went to high schools and college fairs and talked about how much I loved my time at UMass. And then I worked at UMass for a few years and running summer orientations, admission stuff, events. And then I did want to be a writer. In my senior year of college, I found out a family secret about my grandmother. She had committed suicide and didn't die of cancer. And then I asked my grandfather, and that's when he started talking about what happened to her in the Holocaust.
Right.
And so then I wrote about her for the school paper, and that's when my grandfather said, I want to tell you my story. I want you to tell my children and my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. And so that's why I moved to New York, to write his story. I never thought it would be a book. And I was also organizing, so I organized people's homes and offices. So I came to New York, and that's what I did. I organized and wrote my grandfather's story.
So did that end up being the first book that you completed?
That was my first book.
On your grandfather?
Yeah, but it took about 18 years from start to finish, because I came to New York. I helped start a women's sports magazine. It was called Women Next. It was the official magazine of the New York Liberty and some other WNBA teams.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a beautiful, beautiful magazine, and it ended up with the .com bust that left.
Who were some of the players that you were able to interact with, or that really left a good impression on you?
We only got 3 issues out. Rebecca Lobo was our first cover. Nice. She was great. We did a beautiful photo shoot at the Museum of Natural History. Nikki McCrae, I think we did her as well. Lisa Leslie, some others. I wrote about the first women's basketball team from, decades ago.
Don't you feel like something like that would thrive today?
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Like just timing, I guess?
Yeah, I think, we started and we had venture capitalists, and they wanted to make this huge website and kind of build it that way. And I think the woman who really had the heart behind this wanted to go in a different direction and not jump so quick. So we ended up just folding.
So after that folded, where did your career take you? Well,
before that, I had worked for the New York Daily News.
Okay.
I was assistant editor on the Apod page, wrote some op-eds for them. And then I got a call. I started organizing closets again. And then I got a call from the new president of Hunter College. Her husband was my boss at the News, and she asked me to come organize her office and run her staff, and I became her chief of staff.
So organization always had some part
Yeah.
small and large, now large, then small in your life?
Yeah, I mean, that was big. I had a huge staff. I was liaisoning with everybody, deans, alumni, faculty, students. So that was a lot of kind of office organizing. But I had been organizing people's homes and offices in New York City, from billionaires who had, 5-story townhouses to lofts to small apartments.
Okay, let's unpack the organization part here, because we're going to get to the 90 square foot apartment. But first, were you always like this? Like growing up, did you organize all of your belongings as a kid, like in orderly fashion? Like, was this always a part of your life?
It was. I had a large bedroom growing up with 2 walk-in closets.
Was your bedroom bigger than 90 square feet?
Oh, yeah. It was like 17 feet by 17 feet. I mean, that tiny apartment could fit in at least 4 times. At least.
It's mind-blowing. I love it.
Yeah. The 2 closets I had growing up together were almost 90 square feet. And for fun as a kid, I would take everything out of the closets and I'd reorganize it. I'd do my friends at sleepovers. I'd do their closets. My French teacher, I remember getting extra credit in her class for organizing her back closet. But I just loved it. I love puzzles. And for me, organizing a closet is like where all the pieces go. So that was always fun for me.
Are you big into Tetris? You a big fan?
I used to like to play it just to kind of get the
I feel
order
like
in.
you'd be really good at
Yeah.
Tetris, like a championship level if you played it enough.
It was fun.
So you organized it. That was something you just developed over time. You got good at, and then when did it become a viable career option?
Well, in college, it was my first time living in a small space, and then I had a roommate. So I was learning how to organize a small space, and especially then when I came to New York, we have a lot smaller spaces. And like the city itself, the buildings go up. And so when you're organizing a space, especially a smaller space, you need to organize going up. So you want to utilize a whole wall up to a ceiling. And so I was kind of learning these tricks. When I moved to New York, I knew I could organize to pay the bills. And so I learned a lot of things about organizing and taking advantages of space, but also learning how to motivate people.
Mm-hmm.
I had to get billionaires to get rid of neckties and hoarders to get rid of paper and string and stuff.
How do you motivate somebody to get rid of something that has even a small amount of value to them, or a perceived value? Like, how do you do that?
Well,
or is that a secret in the book?
It is a secret. No, it's something innate, I think, all the years of working with people and learning how to do it. But I try to, when I go to organize someone, I don't just start in their closet. We have to have a discussion first. And I try to help them find out what they really want to do with their lives. Like, what do you love to do? And I ask them, why can't you do it more often? And often the reason is because of stuff. We have to spend time cleaning stuff or organizing stuff, or I got to get to other stuff by moving stuff, or I have to work to pay for the stuff. And all that time wasted is time you could be spent doing something else. So I try to, I just worked with a client yesterday. We filled 8 garbage bags of clothes, scarves. Well, I would say, do you like the scarf? And she would say, well, I don't know. And I say, unless you tell me you love that scarf, you're not going to wear it. So I try to, and then I just said, get rid of it. I want to leave you so when you open your closet, you love most everything. Or, you don't want to see a pile of books. Stuff around also creates anxiety. And I try to help people, because people either get overwhelmed by this stuff or they don't know where to begin. And so I really kind of help them, and I try to leave them with a little homework to do.
Yeah, the don't know where to begin, I think that's a big builder of anxiety, right? What would you suggest somebody, they should call you to help organize, obviously, but what would you suggest, start with a specific room or a specific type of object? What would you start with?
I think it depends on what your stuff is. I always say to people, when I go do talks, I'll say how many of you could get rid of 5 things today? Go back to your apartment or your home. One could be an envelope that was from a bill you paid online, or even, a bent paper clip. How many of you could get rid of just 5 things? An old sock. And most people say yes. I said, could you do that every day for a week? That's 35 things. So I try to make them see that it's less things. But if you're really not sure, I say start with your socks. Okay? Take your sock drawer. We all have one. Dump all your socks on the bed. Go through the socks. Any missing? A partner? Any have a hole? Any you really don't wear? I mean, have you ever cleaned out your entire sock drawer and had no socks to wear? No, we have so many socks. And I remember after 9/11 doing this sock collection for first responders. They needed socks. So we have so many socks, and people could use socks. Or if you don't need the socks, use them to dust. But go through your socks and just see what you can get rid of from socks. Because all you have to do is your socks, because it's an easier step. And then when you're done, hopefully you've got rid of some socks, move on to maybe underwear. Mm-hmm. Okay, and then you can just do T-shirts. Try to break it down to just one section, because people get overwhelmed when they see all their clothes. So maybe do one section a day.
That's a very good piece of advice. I bet you I could get rid of at least 5. I'm in that transition period right now where I had those like really weird graphic socks, and like that's being phased out now, and I'm like kind of over it now. Sure. So I'm kind of buying like the ankle showing socks now, and I'm stuck with 30 pairs of graphic socks. And I'm wondering, you know what, I could probably give away or throw out maybe 70% of these socks. That's a good point. Yeah. And I'm going to do that when I get home.
Yeah. And you try to motivate people too. You're not only making space in your sock drawer, you are helping somebody else when you donate something. Everybody needs something.
So at what point did you decide that you were going to make this like a career option to help people organize? And how did you get your first client?
Well, when I came to New York, I had an idea that this was what I wanted to do. I had seen someone before I moved to New York on the Today Show organizing and getting paid for it, and I thought I could do that in my sleep. So I had done it for some friends and for people I worked with. So when I came to New York, I found an organizing company in the phone book. I know that's unheard of now. What's a phone book?
What's that?
I know. It's a doorstop now. And I literally walked into her office. It was on Park Avenue, knocked on the door, and she happened to be there. And then she had me go to a client with her the next day. And she put me in charge of one closet, loved what I did, and hired me.
What was when you moved to New York City? Actually, let's backtrack to Boston or to Mass. Were you living in a tiny apartment there, or was it a normal-sized apartment?
Well, my first apartment actually was an efficiency. It was in an old pocketbook factory in Amherst, less than a mile from the Emily Dickinson Museum. Wow. And it was small. It just had I had a shared bathroom, but it had one wall that was floor-to-ceiling shelves and hanging space. And that really gave me a good idea of how to kind of organize space. It was really well used. I mean, it was a small space, and then I had the other wall was kind of a kitchen and a window. Then I just had my futon on one side.
So you were used to smaller spaces. Yeah. The famous 90 square foot apartment, was that the first apartment in New York City, or did that come later?
Well, I lived in the Bronx with my uncle
for
a number of years, and then I was working at Hunter College as the chief of staff, and I had thought to myself, I gotta go. I want to give myself a year. My grandfather was like, when are you going to finish my book? Because now he was calling it a book. So I said, I'd saved a lot of money for 4 years at Hunter. I said, I'm going to quit and give myself 1 year to finish the book. And at the same time, my uncle said, it's time you live on your own.
Okay.
So I started looking for an apartment, and I looked on the Upper East Side because the realtor said your money goes farther, but I think she meant faster. The rents were crazy. And then I talked to a friend who said she had a friend who was looking to sublet her apartment on the Upper West Side. She said, but I got to warn you, it's small. And I thought, how small could it be? And that's when I went and looked at the tiny place.
So what was your first reaction when you stepped inside?
I had a friend with me. My friend gasped. It was small, but it was also packed with stuff. And as an organizer, I was used to seeing the order amid the chaos. So I wasn't really freaked out. One wall was brick. I saw the bones. I saw the potential. There really was no space for the three of us to stand. She had an open futon. And then I climbed up and looked at the loft bed, and I came down, and I told myself it was just for 1 year, just to get my grandfather's book written and to get that living in Manhattan bug out of my system. And I thought after that year, I'll get another job and get a bigger apartment, probably in Westchester or something, and then that will be it. I had no idea that decision to live there would change the rest of my life.
So I was going to ask that. So the rent was very cheap, obviously, because it was so small, but you wanted to live in Manhattan, and that's why you chose to live in a small apartment for that rent as opposed to, say, living in the suburbs for a similar rent in a bigger space.
Right. I was hoping to try Manhattan, see what it was like. I moved to New York. I thought it would be fun.
Okay. And the location was fantastic, right? It was right across the street from Central Park?
70th and Columbus.
So, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Location.
Everything.
The location is completely set there. Okay. And so somebody was living there. So this was a habitable place.
Right.
Okay. Were there similar were there
several 90 square foot apartments in the city, or is this an anomaly? Is this like one of the only? Is this the smallest apartment in New York City?
Well, I think some have been smaller. You can see them on YouTube. There are different ones, have different amenities. Somebody sent me who's in 45. It's not an apartment. It's just kind of a box, 45 square feet, somewhere over a theater in Brooklyn or somewhere.
But is that like, so that I got into
But
this
there are.
YouTube tunnel yesterday preparing for this,
Right.
watching all of these. First of all, I cannot believe there was this one apartment that folded out rooms.
Oh, yeah.
It's like an origami style. That blew my mind. That was super impressive.
Yeah.
But like, there were some that were claiming to be the smallest apartment in New York, and they were like, what is it, 100 square feet, 90 square feet, but they were in different locations. So I was curious but then some of them I feel like they weren't actual dwellings, but they were created to be somewhere to live, you know? So I was wondering if this one was actually just like a standalone apartment that was advertised, and it was.
I don't know if it was advertised. I found it through a friend who had been
okay.
living there for 10 years, but I think the apartment next to mine and hers was at one point combined. And then
Okay.
mine was a 5th floor walk up. So the one below, I think the ones below mine were also similar.
Okay.
I'd never seen them.
So do you mind telling us what the rent was?
It was $700.
$700 a month.
Yeah.
And so compare that to what would a normal apartment have been like?
$2,600.
Okay, so you're saving a considerable
Oh,
amount
yeah.
of money. Okay.
Mhm.
So and that's amazing for the location you're in.
$700 on the Upper West Side is
N-
like free.
No way that you'd
Yeah.
be able to find that.
Yeah.
Okay, so a big motivator is I want to save money while doing this.
Well, I had saved for years,
Right.
and I figured I'm going to put that towards living. And I really didn't want to, erase all my savings by
Okay.
living in some really expensive place. And I figured it'd just be for a year.
Okay, so you find this place, you sign it, it's yours. You say you're going to be here for a year.
I don't sign anything. No,
Oh.
but I don't sign anything.
Oh, you don't?
It's a woman who lived there for about 10 years,
Okay.
and she was getting married or moving in with a boyfriend or something. So we just did it kind of on a year-to-year basis. And every year she'd call me up. And
Like under the table, like here's
Yeah.
your money. Wow, okay.
But I just wrote her a check, and she sent the rent in.
So this is not necessarily officially a condo in a way. Or maybe
She
it is.
was
I don't know.
paying. You know what? When you get a good deal
So
in New
you're
York,
like a
you don't
tenant
say
for
anything.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Which
move
comes
in.
into play later, but
Okay. Yes. Let's table that and come back to it
Right.
for when you leave that place. So it's empty. You get there. You have your stuff. Now, before you even move in, I guess you're looking at all of your belongings and saying, well, I can't bring everything. So what was that process like of dwindling everything down?
yeah, I had less than a month, and I couldn't even bring kind of an eighth of my stuff. So I got rid of some stuff, but I put 77 boxes of stuff into storage. And I know that
Wow.
number because I create an inventory of every box, because that's what I used to do for my clients. When we would move them, I'd create an inventory in case while they had renovations and their stuff was in storage, they could just look at their list and say, oh, I need this. It's in box 71. Then you go get the box. Every year I ended up staying, I went back to storage.
That's clever. That's
Yeah.
really clever. Number the boxes
Number
and
the
just write
boxes.
down what you have.
Yeah, and it's also, you don't want to write stereo equipment or, expensive, because boxes could walk. You never know. But every year that I stayed in that apartment, I went back to storage and started going through my stuff. And every year I got rid of stuff based on the fact I hadn't needed it or wanted it that year. And by the time I left after 5 years, I got rid of all 77 boxes.
You were there for 5 years.
Mhm.
One turned into 5.
Mhm.
Oh, man. Wow.
Yeah.
5 years in a 90 square foot
I
apartment.
probably would have stayed longer, but we'll get into that.
Okay. So we're still at zero. We're still at moving. Okay. So you now have dwindled down to what you think will fit in the apartment. Did everything you thought would fit actually fit, or did you have to further cut?
No, everything pretty much fit. I mean, I had quit my job at the college, so I was just working part-time organizing. So, and then I was riding my bike and going to yoga. So I just needed kind of those clothes, a couple dressy things. There was no kitchen. So I had a mini fridge and a toaster oven. And I had measured everything before I moved in. And I bought these shelves that went really high.
Mm-hmm.
So I created one shelf, turned into a desk. And then all the other shelves, I got totes. And so all my stuff just fit.
And there was room for the shelves.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you saying, you were just talking about it with somebody in the office, that if Michael Jordan were to walk in there, he would be able to touch both ends of the wall by extending his arms.
Yeah, 7.5 feet one way and 12 feet the other way.
Oh, man. Aren't there prison cells larger than that?
I was in San Francisco last year and went to Alcatraz. And I went in, I stood the same
You're like,
way.
this is luxurious.
Yeah, I was like, I could do this. A little drafty, but yeah.
No problem. I mean, the sunlight sucks, but
Yeah.
otherwise. Oh, man. Okay, so you move in, you have the organization down pat. What was the first month like living there? Did you at all ever feel claustrophobic or anything?
The first night I had a friend stay over because I thought I might roll out of the loft
Where
bed.
did they stay?
She stayed with me right up, and because
Okay.
it was like a full size.
Oh, it was? Okay.
Yeah, so up in the loft, and I was so exhausted from unpacking and going up and down the stairs the day I moved in, and making the bed, which was making it on my hands and knees. And because I only had 23 inches of space between the loft bed and the ceiling, so I was exhausted. So we fell.
That's
right,
it.
Yeah.
So you're the mattress, 23 inches of air between the
Right.
mattress and the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
You ever hit your head?
I never hit my head.
What?
My mom did once when she stayed over, but you think, what if I jump up in the middle of the night? But nobody does that, really.
No, I'm
Oh.
scared of waking up in the morning and forgetting how low the ceiling is and hitting my head on the ceiling.
Yeah.
That never happened to you?
No, usually you open your eyes.
You must
well,
be super responsible
The
then.
first
Obviously you
night,
are.
yeah. So we go to sleep. I pass out. A couple hours later, I wake up drenched in sweat, having a panic attack because I opened my eyes and there was my friend, the wall, the ceiling, and I started freaking out. I have to get out of here. And I scampered out, almost fell down the ladder. And I started pacing, and I said, what am I going to do? I can't do this. This is crazy. What
Oh,
was I
man.
thinking? And I finally calmed down, and I rolled my yoga mat on the floor, and my friend dropped down a pillow, and she said to me, Felice, why did you agree to live here? And I said, because I wanted to finish writing the book about my grandfather's experience in the Holocaust. And as soon as I said that, I realized, and I thought of all the stories he told me. He was in 8 different camps for 5 years. And I looked around at this tiny little apartment. I said, look, I've got a bed. Okay, it's close to the ceiling, but I have a lock on the door. I have food. I have clothes. I'm safe. This is paradise compared to what he went through.
Total perspective.
And I never had another panic attack again. In fact, I love that little bed. It became my little safe haven.
Yeah, the perspective there really helped,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. How many years in did you complete the book?
It was a couple years.
Okay.
And at the end of that first year, I planned to leave, but my life had just gotten so much better. Like free time went up, and my stress went down, and my happiness went up, and I had more time to do all the things I love to do. And I said, I don't want to leave. So I stayed again and again.
And you credited it to being in this space and what little stuff you had in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The organization of your life
Absolutely.
just improved.
Just there was less stuff to worry about, less expenses, didn't have to work as hard to pay for so much. So I was still working hard. I was still organizing and writing, but I wasn't working stressed and doing what I didn't want to do.
So people can go online and see pictures. Obviously, we'll do our best to describe it. You had the bed on basically like a bunk bed style setup where it was close to the ceiling. What was the kitchen? I forget. Was there anything to cook on? Did you have a hot plate or something?
I had a hot pot.
A hot pot, okay.
Which brought a lot of college deja vu back. You can make macaroni and cheese and hard-boiled eggs in a hot pot, but I had a toaster oven, and you can make a lot in a toaster oven. It was a small
It's
mini
like a really micro oven.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it was all. But I was living in the Upper West Side. I could, open my door and there was name the food, and it was right there.
So food, regarding food, I guess you must have eaten out a lot more than you would have if you had a full kitchen? Or did you find that?
I eat a lot of salad, so I made salads, or you can buy prepared foods, so I would do
Okay.
that, and it was.
So the budget didn't get astronomical for
No,
eating out?
no.
See, if I picture myself in that situation, and I'd be going to restaurants every day.
Yeah, no.
Just
I
because, yeah. Okay, so you had it in check. You also had it. So you said you had a yoga mat in there. So you also had enough space at least to do some sort of exercise.
Yeah, you could do a few yoga. You might hit your hand on something,
Okay.
like at the ladder or whatever. But I went to the gym. I mean, I'd look out my window.
Was there a gym in the building?
No.
Oh, there wasn't.
But
okay.
I would go to the New York Sports Club. I had Central Park. I had
Okay.
I would bike. There were a lot of things that I did.
Mhm.
And, I worked in my apartment, but I also had a writing space downtown. And New York is your backyard.
Yeah.
What do you need? It's all there.
And you were right to Central Park. So how much of your time would you say you spent just being in Manhattan versus being in your apartment? Is it any more or less given the amount of space?
You know what? When I was working in my apartment, the whole space became my office, which we're sitting here in your office, and this was like the whole space. So this is now in work. If this was also your bedroom, you'd go up to your bed, and it would become the bedroom. If you were getting dressed, the whole thing would become your closet. If you were getting lunch ready, it would become like that. And I think for me, it was just about my priorities. And so it didn't seem like I was sacrificing much, or, it just became second nature.
Did you have a lot of people over?
I had friends over occasionally,
Yeah.
yeah. I had a friend who had a large one bedroom 2 blocks away, but my apartment was neater and more organized, so we would hang out at my place.
She had more stress. She had more stress
Right.
because she had more stuff.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's fascinating. And so what were the range of reactions from your friends when they saw the apartment for the first time over the 5 years?
You're nuts. What? How are you doing
Is that the
this?
consensus?
Yeah. Like what? And now they don't laugh anymore. Now, I speak all over the country, and I wrote a book about it, and
Yeah.
I loved it. It was great. And now everyone's like, I want small space. I mean, when the video ended up going viral, people around the world were asking me where they could find a small space like this.
Yeah, that one, I think it was the Good Morning America piece, is at least like 500,000 views or 1 million views. I mean, that's amazing just for this story. So that was, how many years ago did you move in there?
I actually moved in 2007.
2007?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the clip was from, I think it was 2010. So you were there for 5 years. Before we get to you exiting, though, what did you learn living there that you found very interesting? Like, I wouldn't have expected this living in a small space.
I grew up in a large house. I
Yeah.
always thought I would live in a large house.
Yeah.
And no way would I do that now.
Really?
Because, yeah, I mean, I could go up anywhere now and buy a huge house, but that wouldn't make me happy, because I don't need a huge space. I don't want to have to pay for a huge space. I don't want to have to clean a huge space. I just want enough space that I can have my stuff and not be cramped. And, I'd rather live near a bike path than do something else. That's what I want to do with my life. I mean, I love to stand up paddleboard. That's what I'd rather do.
Do you live in a small space now?
I have a 1-bedroom. It's under 500 square feet, and it's perfect space.
It's that, and that's still,
More than I need.
yeah, I guess
It's
so,
still
right?
big,
Given
yeah.
that what you've lived in before, but that's still,
Yeah.
I guess that would be considered on the smaller side in the city, right? And you still live in the city?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you're still living in that frame of mind then. That's fascinating. Okay, so before we get to the writing portion of your life, so what happened at the 5-year mark then?
Well, before the 5-year mark, when the video went viral, suddenly, I was getting emails from people around the world asking for advice on organizing and decluttering and all this stuff. And then I started getting emails from people saying, I saw your video, I bought your book on your grandfather. And so suddenly my grandfather's book started selling around the world. And I was being asked to speak all over, and I was suddenly finding myself in a new career. I was being a Holocaust educator. And so
What were you doing at the moment, the day before the video became viral? What were you doing?
organizing.
You were organizing, you're doing stuff locally for people.
Right.
And then this blows up.
Mhm.
Your book is out at that point.
My grandfather's book,
The
yeah.
grandfather's
Mhm.
book is out. And so, okay, wow.
Yeah.
So this basically changed your life.
Yeah, I mean, I moved into that space to write this book, and then that space became the marketing platform for that book. And so after that, I came home one day, and of all the people, of the millions who saw the video, there was one person I didn't expect to see it, and that was the landlord. And he saw me on Good Morning America, and he said, "Oh, her name's not on the lease." So I came home, and there was a big eviction notice on the door. I'd never seen that sign before.
Okay.
So the woman I was subletting from and I went down to housing court. We negotiated a couple more months. They'd let me stay till I found another place.
Why did they want you out, though? I don't understand.
At first, they wanted me out. And then they said, well, you can stay, but we're going to double the rent. And I said, okay, because it was still less than what I was paying. And then they just changed their mind.
So the original lady that you had been paying, I'm just trying to understand why suddenly the real landlord showed up. I understand that the attention was attracted due to the video, but why wasn't this person involved in the first place? So were you like a sublet of a sublet?
Yeah, I was subletting her. She wasn't a sublet. She was a tenant.
she was the tenant, so
Yeah.
she was subletting to you
Right.
indefinitely, and the landlord
Yeah.
didn't know and was only made aware due to the video.
Right.
Got you. Okay,
Yeah.
so then the landlord's like, hey, wait a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So then what happened? Double the rent?
No,
Which is still great.
No, yeah, it was. I would have, but then they reneged on that for some reason. So then they said they gave me like 4 months.
To leave.
Right.
Okay.
So I looked all around for another place. I wanted to stay in my neighborhood, and everything was so expensive. And I thought, well, my whole lifestyle is going to change again if I move into a place that I have to suddenly pay 4 times what I
Right.
was paying. So I was down in Florida doing a bunch of book talks with my grandfather, who was about 90. And I told him, we were talking, I told him about I couldn't find another rental, and he said to me, buy a place already. He said, I'm going to give you the down payment. He said, you moved into a shoebox to write about my life. Now I want to help you enjoy yours. So I went back to New York. First place I looked at, I fell in love with, and I ended up buying it. It was a great deal.
What's the name of the book on your grandfather?
What Papa Told Me.
What Papa Told Me. And what was his reaction to reading the book?
He was thrilled. I remember getting the first copy, and I'm standing on Columbus Avenue just crying, talking to him on the phone, because I wrote the book as a gift for him. I never expected to sell one copy, let alone tens of thousands of copies of the book. And it's taught in schools. It's been translated into other languages. And, that's it. That's all I cared about, was doing that for him.
That's awesome. And I want to ask a lot more about the writing career, but that space today, what is it now? Is it an actual residence? I'm very curious, actually.
Yeah, somebody else lives there.
Somebody else lives in that apartment. I'm curious to know what the rent is now that this has become a thing. I bet you. What do you think it would be?
I'm sure it's at least $1,400.
Because if they said no
At
to
least.
double, maybe even 2,000.
Could be.
Yeah,
I think they.
I'm
I think
curious
they were-
now. I got to look that up.
Yeah.
Because I bet that they saw it and said, "Oh, people will be willing to pay." Because even if it's even a
Right.
few hundred lower than a bigger spot,
Right.
yeah.
Well, last
interesting.
year they opened that new apartment building. I think it's it's on the east side, with small micro units, but some are but they're expensive.
So is this becoming a trend now? Like, are condo developers saying, we can get more units out of one building by making them smaller, and people in New York City will be willing to live in them?
Absolutely, New York
Yeah.
City, Boston, San Francisco. This is happening. It's happening all over the world.
Yeah.
I go to these tiny house festivals. So it's tiny dwellings.
Festivals.
Yeah.
Wow.
Tens of thousands of people come to these festivals. In Florida, we had 60,000. There's one in New Jersey, June 16th to the 18th. Sussex County, there's one in New Paltz, New York, the first weekend in July. So
So there's a community of you speak at these. So there's a community of like tiny dwelling enthusiasts that have a sense of pride that they are able to live happily in tiny apartments or tiny dwellings. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
I'd love to go to one. That's
They're
cool.
great. They're so much fun. They make them also, they have a lot of events, and there's vendors and things to do. And people come and ask questions about building their own. And they're all age groups. People just retired. People have their first kid, or kids going to college. They don't want to live in a dorm. People are looking for
Yeah.
all these alternatives.
And so the hotels around the convention centers, do they like triple up and quadruple up
Yeah,
with like
probably.
the walls, those
Right.
the plastic, the paper
Right.
walls. So okay, so you write the book on your father, or grandfather, what Papa Told Me. That becomes a big success. So now at this point, are you saying, I'm gonna make this my full-time job?
Yeah, so everybody was saying, when are you going to write a book on organizing?
Logical, yeah.
Right, so I had toyed for years about writing a book, but I didn't want to write another how-to guide. Everybody knows how to fold their sweaters, right? Most everybody, except my sister, but most everybody knows how to fold their sweaters. But the problem
My
is...
girlfriend would say that I don't.
Right, well, but here, the problem is more when that sweater that you don't wear, that's ripped, that's old, that doesn't fit, that you don't like, why is it still in your closet? Why can't you get rid of it? And so the book that I wanted to write was to help motivate people to kind of get their rear ends in gear. Why should you get rid of it? And helping you to get rid of these things. Just to kind of, because when I work with people, I'm motivating them. If I come over your apartment, I stand with you in front of your closet, and we work together. But I wanted to motivate people from the page.
What's your advice for, this is one thing I struggle with right now. I have empty boxes. And the reason I do is, I'll give a perfect example. I have my empty boxes for my record player and my vinyl. And the reason I have them is because I'm assuming that in X amount of years, let's say 5 years from now, I'm going to need to move them. I know that I'm not in my final destination, or my girlfriend are not in final destination. We will move somewhere. So I find myself keeping boxes in the future event that I'm going to need to pack them up and move them. Should I have a storage space? Probably. Right now I don't. But what do you say to people who like hoard these empty boxes under the assumption of a future move?
If I tell you to go outside and look on the street, you're going to see 100 boxes on the street.
So I'm being dumb.
You're not being dumb. You're just.
It's okay.
I mean, I understand wanting. Some people say, "Oh, I want to." There's no need to. You can get any box, any size, any day. I mean, you don't want to really get food boxes because they might have bugs. But when you go to move, you just wrap your stereo in a bunch of towels and plastic and cushion it and put it in any box. I actually put it in luggage. Sometimes that's safer. But you don't need to save the boxes. If you really want to have the box for a certain reason, make it useful and store off-season clothes in it or do something useful with it, but you don't need the box.
I'm going to throw away the box. Thank you for that.
That's one of 5 things. You've got
one
4
of the
more.
5 things. That's right. So the next book is the one that's on the table right now, 90 Lessons for Living Large and 90 Square Feet or
This
more.
is the newest one.
This is the newest one. Okay. So before we get to that book, what was the one after the your grandfather's book?
So this is the one after.
Oh, this is
the
okay.
Yeah.
So when did you decide, okay, I'm going to write this book and here's my angle?
So right after I moved into my new space, I started, going back and rereading a lot of the emails I got from people around the world. And a lot of people were saying the same thing. Give me tips on doing it. And I thought, okay, I did 90 lessons for living large and 90 square feet for the alliteration, but it's 90 lessons really for living in any size space. I say 90 square feet or more. It doesn't matter if you're 90 or 9,000. It's about trying to get more time in your life to do the things you want to do. And that's really what the motivation is, and spend less time cleaning and organizing and going through your stuff.
So let me unpack that for just,
Nice.
Pardon the pun. That idea, because I'd never really put that 2 and 2 together, and you're giving me a different paradigm here, which I'm really appreciating. I never really saw organization of stuff detracting from my everyday life. In fact, organizing stuff has often been, when I think about it, hindsight being 20/20, it's often been a procrastinator. If I need to do something and I want to put it off for a little bit, I'll clean or I'll alphabetize my records or something like that. So help me understand that part of it. Like how is that related, and how do we sort of break that cycle?
It's baby steps. It's organizing, but it's also getting rid of a lot of stuff. We have all the stuff. And if you were to look at your living room, one shelf in your living room, and put a price tag on everything on one shelf, that half of it has dust on it probably. I mean, we buy stuff that we don't really need. And it's okay to buy stuff you love because you think it's pretty or whatever, but the stuff that you don't need, that's where it can be a problem. Now in college, I used to refold my sweaters and organize my closets when I didn't want to study. So that's kind of a way to be productive, and you feel like you're being productive. And those are kind of steps to kind of get you ready to do a bigger project. But as you go through your records, maybe you think, I never really listened to this record album. Do I need it? As you're going through, what do you really need or want or love? And those are the things you should focus on when you're going through those things.
Okay, I'm going to bring it back to sports because I just thought of something. So I have a lot of sports memorabilia and a lot of jerseys. Now, I don't wear these jerseys. Full disclosure. Maybe once a year, once every 2 years at a sporting event. But when I'm going through my clothing and I see the jersey, it does bring me a smile. I look at it and I say, this is nice. I like this jersey. Will I ever wear the jersey? Probably not. But for some reason, I enjoy it being in my closet. Maybe just because I enjoy the sports team or I enjoy sports in general, whatever. But what do you say to those people who now we're struggling between the need for space, especially if you have several, right? The need for space versus that sort of gray area of what I just described.
Brings you a little smile. If it does bring you a smile, then maybe there's something else that you use the room for that. But if you think...
That's a tough decision, right?
Yeah, if you think... do you know somebody who might really love that jersey?
Yeah, maybe that's a good point, too. Like, if I donated it to somebody or if I see what you're saying, yeah.
Maybe you've got a cousin or somebody or a friend or, you know what, I thought you'd love this. And then you feel good about somebody using it. But, as your life changes, maybe 5 years from now, you're going to have other priorities. And your kids are going to be screaming, and you're not going to care so much about that shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Your life will change. And that's why we have to go through our stuff often, because our lives change. We have our childhood stuff. We have our college stuff. We have our adult stuff. And our lives just change. And that's okay to collect stuff as we go. But you have to stay on top of it, because one day you're just going to have an attic, a garage, a basement filled with old stuff, past stuff. And that's where it gets really overwhelming.
You're too logical. I don't like this. So what's this? So tell me about the touring process and selling a book. So you have this book, The 90 Lessons, and you do speaking engagements. So what is it like as a writer trying to sell a book in 2017?
It's an ebook as well. It's a regular book. It's, I love talking.
Have you noticed there's a difference in the sales? Like, is there different demographics that'll buy like the ebook versus the
some
hardcopy?
will.
Yeah.
I sell a lot of books at the tiny house festivals. And some people say, well, I'm trying not to collect so much stuff. I said, well, get the ebook. And they're like, oh, that's good. Okay. And they're happy. But, it's also, it's got 90 lessons, so you can really open to any page.
You're flipping through the pages, and I see it's a very easily digestible
Yeah.
read. Okay.
So the beginning part is I talk about how living small made my life larger. But then there are just 90 simple lessons in the book. I love going to the tiny house festivals and talking to people. I've been to Canada and, Colorado and everywhere, Texas, and some at festivals, some at just organizations, book clubs, whatever. And people ask questions about their own space or their own stuff, and they want to kind of get tips on how to kind of get rid of their stuff, because we all deal with stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I try to just make it logical. It's about whether you want to live in a small space and how to prepare, or you just want to live in your space and how to live more comfortably. And
do you still consult? Mm-hmm. You still do. So you're doing both at the same. You're a writer and also still the organization consulting business.
Yeah. I'm picky about which clients I take on because I have time. I don't have much time, but I love to help people. Right. I love that they smile.
How many speaking engagements would you do a month or a year?
It depends.
Yeah.
I've got 2 weeks ago I had 6 within 4 days between both books. So
right, so you're still doing speaking
states.
engagements for the grandfather's book, right? Mm-hmm. So you have multiple avenues in which you're speaking. Okay, cool.
So it's fun. I have to remind myself before every talk which direction I'm heading in.
Is there gonna? Are you gonna write another book? Is there anything in the plans?
I am working on another book now.
Okay,
it's a memoir.
Oh, it's a memoir.
So,
okay, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So it's fun. Yeah.
Any timetable? Can you tell us?
I don't know. I'm hoping it's the fall.
Right.
But,
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Where can people find you online?
You can go to FeliceCohen.com, and that's got all the info about Twitter and LinkedIn and all those things.
Fantastic. One last thing before we let you go. If there's one tip that people should know about organization, that they can an actionable item that they could take away from this podcast, that they will remember you by, what would that one actionable item be to better organize themselves?
Have a picture of what you want your life or your home to look like. Hold on to that image. Like I want to see my desk. I don't want to see stuff all over my desk. Hold on to that, and that will help you as you're struggling to get rid of, scraps of paper or whatever it is, or if it's your closet. How do you want that to look? And then remind yourself of that image. And as you're struggling, or because it's not always easy to get rid of stuff, it makes it easier to kind of see that big picture at the end of the. That's not. You want an actual step, then start with good. 5 things a day.
5 things a day. That's a good one too. Yeah. 5 things a day.
Start
for 7
small,
days.
Baby steps.
Yeah, that's 35 things.
Yeah. People can always email me, and I'm happy to give advice online.
And it's on the website, FeliceCohen.com. Thank you for your time. This was a lot of fun.
It was. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Felice Cohen for joining us here on the Apod. All of her information at FeliceCohen.com. And this podcast drops every Wednesday, MSGNetworks.com, iTunes, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for checking it out, and thank you for listening. Have a great rest of the week. Enjoy the Stanley Cup Finals. Enjoy the NBA Finals. Enjoy whatever sports you watch. Enjoy whatever you enjoy. And by all means, please try not to be scared when you go up a stalled elevator. Just try.